When you're a fighter who is trying to beat other fighters, there are two things that make your life difficult. One is your own weaknesses and flaws, and the second is someone else's strengths and exploitable weaknesses. And it might seem impossible to do, but if you really study someone, you can find their weakness and you can exploit it. Every great champion seems invincible until they're not. That's what makes this sport so exciting. You always have the possibility of an upset. So how would you go about studying somebody for weeks or even months to try and figure out how to beat them? Now let's talk about it. This is part 2 of our series on becoming a better fighter. If you missed part 1, check it out here. But in today's video, we'll talk about how to beat an unbeatable fighter. If you get value from today's video, share it with a friend. It helps out both of us. As always, the biggest names in the sport were once up-and-comers just like you. You can be the next big thing in combat sports. Just remember that all of these champions were once in the position that you're in now. They had to come through the ranks and fight their way to the top. And every single one of them studied the game relentlessly along the way. A lot of people think that being a good fighter is all instinct. Sure, some fighters have more natural ability than others. However, even the most naturally gifted athletes in the world put in hours upon hours of training. To be great at anything, you need to put in the work. The truth is that the better you get as a fighter, the more you start to realize how much you don't know. Let's take two of the greatest fighters ever, Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. Both of these guys fought 40+ professional fights before they ever faced each other. For years, fans debated who was the better fighter. What made this fight so anticipated was that it was basically two different styles of fighting. Floyd was known for his incredible defensive boxing skills, while Manny was known for his overwhelming offensive pressure. For years, Manny had been knocking out fighters with his non-stop pressure and aggressive style. People thought that Floyd's defensive style was boring, but it was very effective. In fact, no one had ever been able to knock Floyd out. On the other hand, everyone thought that Manny's style of fighting was exciting, but he had never been able to beat a defensive fighter like Floyd. Some said that Floyd was too defensive and that Manny would eventually wear him down. Others said that Manny couldn't box defensively, and that Floyd would easily outpoint him. Basically, the debate was endless. When the two finally got into the ring together, though, it proved to be one of the biggest letdowns in combat sports history. Floyd simply used his superior defensive skills to outpoint Manny over the course of 12 rounds. Some people say that Floyd simply aged Manny by outworking him in the later rounds, but that wasn't the case. Manny was simply outclassed because he didn't have the skills to deal with such a defensive fighter. Now, this isn't to say that Manny isn't a great fighter. He's widely considered to be one of the best of all time, and he absolutely dominated many other opponents throughout his career. But even the best fighters in the world have weaknesses. So when it comes to figuring out how to beat an unbeatable fighter, the first thing that you need to do is look at yourself. We all love to look at other fighters and analyze their fighting style, but that's easy. The real analysis begins when you look at yourself and figure out your own weaknesses. Because the truth is that your own weaknesses are going to be what determines how far you can go in the sport. See, most fighters will never reach their full potential because they stop themselves. They fight within their own comfort zone and avoid taking the risks that could lead to their downfall. Greatness only happens when you step outside of your comfort zone and push yourself beyond what you think your limits are. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to accept that you'll fail sometimes. We live in a society that tells us that we should always win and that failure is bad. But in reality, failure is the only way that we learn. It's the only way that we improve ourselves. So if you're serious about being a fighter, you have to accept that failing is part of the process. Now that you understand your own weaknesses, it's time to move on to the second step. You need to study your opponent. When you're a beginner, you tend to get caught up in the excitement of the sport, and you may make the mistake of simply trying to knock your opponent out. But as you gain experience, you begin to realize how unlikely that is. Even if you're a striker and your opponent is a grappler, if you stand in the middle of the cage and swing for the knockout, your opponent will probably take you down anyway. So instead of simply trying to knock someone out, you need to develop a strategy. Strategy is a huge part of the sport. Even if you're a striker, you need to be prepared to take the fight to the ground. And if you're a grappler, you need to be prepared to strike back. If your opponent takes the fight to the mat, in today's world of combat sports, the lines between striking and grappling are blurred. Nowadays, most fighters train in multiple disciplines. So you need to be well-rounded in all areas. Which brings us to the third point. You need to create a game plan. After you've studied your opponent for hours, looking at their strengths and weaknesses, you need to come up with a game plan. A great example of this is the fight between Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. In their first fight, Nate took Conor down and outstruck him on the mat to win the fight by submission. In their second match, though, Conor was prepared. He knew that he couldn't win a grappling match against Nate, so he simply stood in the striking range and picked Nate apart over the course of 5 rounds. Even though Nate is a skilled striker, he couldn't handle Conor's precision and power in the stand-up game. If you're a striker, then you want to study your opponent's striking technique. Look for any sort of telltale signs that they show when they're tired or getting frustrated. If you're a grappler, study their movement and look for any kind of imbalance or weakness in their base. Everyone has weaknesses that they're unaware of. Your job is to find them and capitalize on them. Speaking of capitalizing, which brings us to the fourth point. You need to execute your game plan. Going back to the Floyd Mayweather vs. Manny Pacquiao fight, Manny actually had the advantage in this one. He was simply the more skilled boxer, but he didn't have the skills necessary to deal with Floyd's defensive style. In this fight, Manny was also dealing with a shoulder injury that he didn't disclose. This goes back to the whole point of accepting failure. If you're injured, you need to pull out of the fight. If you're tired, you need to take a break. But Manny was fighting for his legacy, and he didn't want to postpone the fight any longer. And even though he had a game plan to deal with Floyd's defense, he failed to execute it. He would often find himself trying to throw punches from too far away, and Floyd would simply use his defensive skills to block or deflect the punch. Then, Floyd would counter with a quick combination of his own, often catching Manny off guard. This brings us to the last point, which is the moment of truth. How does a fighter fall? Every Goliath has his moment where he falls. Sometimes it's a moment that no one expects, and sometimes it's a moment that's been foreshadowed for years. Goliaths fall in the ring when their flaws are exploited. All you have to do is study them long enough to figure out what their flaw is and how to take advantage of it. That's how you beat an unbeatable fighter. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and comment below to let me know what you thought. If you want to learn more about fighting, I'll link a couple videos here. Thanks for watching. Get out there and be great.